Hey, good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Troy. What's going on, brother?
It's a beautiful day in California. How's it out there in Chicago town?
Man, it's good. It's good. Spring in Chicago is kind of weird. It fluctuates a lot. It'll be 70 one day and then 20 the next day, but the temperatures are slowly getting better and better, getting warmer, I should say. So
Yeah,
it's been nice, man. It's been nice.
nothing beats California. We had rain. We had a lot of rain the past week or week and a half, but today it's blue skies and
Mm,
enjoying the outdoors at the moment.
mm. One thing I miss about California is consistency. That consistently beautiful weather. Beautiful
Mm-hmm.
weather.
Yep. Yeah, everything good out there in terms of I guess the spread of the virus and all that, or is it reducing? Numbers going down?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. Being a big city, it took a while to hit its peak. We're not as bad as New York. Obviously, they're bigger over there. They hit a higher peak, but we're kind of delayed behind them. And yeah, I think it's just getting there, and they're talking in May, early May, that stuff is going to start opening up.
Oh, good.
So yeah, we're slowly getting there, and a lot of blessings that I have no close family or friends that have suffered from the COVID. So just
Mm.
grateful every day that
Did they actually get sick?
who's that?
Oh, did anybody get sick or just?
Oh no, I was saying grateful that no one is sick.
Oh, good.
Especially my grandmother, man. Like she's 89 and immunocompromised and everything, but we just been keeping her sheltered. She can do little
Yeah,
walks around the house and maybe outside her porch, but overall, man, everyone's staying safe. So grateful.
good.
Yeah.
And then how would you say the sentiment is in general out in there where you're at with such a much higher population as far as depression, people being lonely, depressed?
Man, I love that you bring that up because I was talking to a good buddy of mine the other day. His name's Matthew, but we were talking about that really truly being the true pandemic, depression, anxiety, and I think it's true all around the states. But in Chicago, man, it's present. It's present. You can just feel it when you're walking down the street. You'll try to make eye contact with someone and smile, for instance, and just no eye contact.
Hmm.
And just you can just tell people are in their head. They're on they're walking, but they're already on the next thing. They're already thinking about what they're going to do on their cell phone. So yeah, a lot of people I've been meeting around the city, just dealing with the depression, anxiety, and especially the area where my church is planning, which is Wicker Park, Bucktown area.
Hmm.
Man, the for instance, in the hospital in that area, the highest incidence of patients, actually people in their kids in their late teens, 20s, 30s, because they're getting admitted to the hospital from drug overdose, drinking too much alcohol,
Mm.
maybe falling at 3 p.m., et cetera, et cetera. So man, yeah, it's prevalent. It's prevalent, and with COVID coming, COVID just adds another element. There already so many people are already suffering, so adding the COVID to
Mm.
the mix has just really been causing a lot of depression, increased levels of depression, anxiety.
Yeah, I would imagine that with a lot of people not able to do their usual routines, going to work out, working at their job, just being shut in at home, that's got to be tough.
Mm, yeah, yeah, man, not getting the normal vitamin D. You know, we as humans, we rely on routine, like you're saying. We rely on the routine and the consistency of things. So if we're already suffering from things, it makes it that much easier for us to be triggered. You know what I mean? Just get triggered, then you fall in this negative whirlwind. This negative thing leads to something else, and
Mm.
then by before you know it, you're stuck and you're overwhelmed. You don't even know, you can't even move. You know, so it's sad, the pandemic.
Definitely. Well, one of the things that I think about is there was my story that I shared last time, and now I want to know more about your story, because you had said something in a recent text to me about how you were able to uh, effectively get rid of depression in your life too, which is huge.
Mm,
And I find that so many people who struggle with depression also deal with loneliness. They also deal with anxiety, and these are very common emotions amongst humans,
mm,
especially today, because as we become more connected digitally, we become more disconnected physically,
mm,
and we are physical beings. And in that, the way that I believe God made us to be is in true community, where we're able to touch each other, because touch is one of those things that goes missing oftentimes when you get things like today where people are being forced to stay at home and shut in. And yeah, I mean, hopefully you'll have family around, but we hear about so many people that are dealing with wanting to divorce now, or um, or the other side, I guess there's going to be the COVID babies too, which is a good thing
mm.
in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but one of the big challenges that I think a lot of people are facing, regardless of whether they have family or not, is just that sense of loneliness, because they don't feel something, right? They're not feeling accepted or a part of something.
Mm, absolutely.
So I'd love for you to
Absolutely.
share, yeah, please share with us and share with me, what it is that you've done in this past year or two that's made the difference.
Yeah, yeah, and brother, thank you for having me on. It was such a blessing to hear your story, and as our relationship gets grows more and more, just hearing your story and everything. So, thanks for having me on, though. So yeah, I would say so. I want to talk about the backstory first. So I would say it goes back to when I was growing up. I was a teenager, and I think the you hit a key word there, loneliness. When I was growing up, I was very shy. I was very shy. I didn't know how to interact with strangers. I didn't know even most of my family, I didn't know how to express myself. I had a lot of these thoughts and emotions that came in my mind, and I wanted to express them, but I think there was fear of not knowing how they would react, and
Mm,
two, just yeah, just being scared. And you know, it that lasted forever, or not forever, that lasted for a while. And what really hit me hard was when so my parents started fighting. You're talking about relationships, fighting. And they were my two people I just looked up to. You know, my dad for certain reasons, my mom for certain reasons. They both had um, God-given gifts, so I was just very fortunate to be um, just grow up in such a good household. You know, we go on road trips and family trips and everything. But once they started fighting, things were just changing, and it was a slow, drawn out process. It wasn't like it all happened at once. Like there's this massive fight, then it was over. It was drawn out, and then as a kid, it seems like eternity. It seems like eternity every time your
mm,
parents fight. It just you're taking in all that emotion. And you know, I'm the middle kid, so my brother's 10 years older. At that point, he was pretty much out of the house. He was living on his own. My sister was, she was, how old was she? Maybe 8 or 9. So she understood, but she couldn't really fully get it. It was me kind of leading her, but I didn't necessarily have anyone to talk to about these feelings and
mm,
things I was going through. So their fighting eventually led to a divorce. And um yeah, I still remember, you know, the day like yesterday when I there was a whole day. I went through my day of school. I was at that time a freshman in high school. And I didn't say anything to anyone. I bottled up all these emotions. And at the end of the day, I had a really good friend, Kelly Powers, who she lived in my neighborhood, and we would walk to school together. And at the end of the day, her and I just walked out to the football stadium, and we just sat in the bleachers. No one was there, and I just started bawling, man. Just started bawling, and all those emotions were just unleashed. And
Mm,
I just remember her giving me comfort, and I remember that feeling. Like even though I didn't know what to do, it was just so nice to have someone there, someone that had built a relationship and that was fully attentive on me and just listening, taking on these different things. Um, so the divorce was just, I would say, the first time when I really fell in this trap of depression. Like I was already dealing with loneliness, being shy, not knowing how to express myself. So
mm,
this divorce has put me in depression, anxiety, and everything. And this is when I kind of got into the searching mode of my life. I started just surrounding myself with people that I thought were fulfilled in life, and I thought that had it all together. But what I was finding as I was befriending different people, I was easily influenced. So I was easily just falling into traps of partying, doing drugs, alcohol. This started freshman year in high school too. So I was real young, but yeah, just literally getting to the point of I would I was a weekend warrior. I was um, anticipating the weekends just for this short period of these few hours of just unleashing everything, because I think truly it's because it was how I could just escape my problems, all this in all these thoughts, all these things I was internalizing through the week. I was just able to escape all that. So it was almost just resetting. I would go through the party and then I would just be able to reset. Then it was a vicious cycle. Then I would go through it again. And honestly, man, this was a theme for a good part of my life. Good part of my life. There was a period in there that I was like, man, I'm getting really deep into this stuff. If I keep going at this speed, I could end up in jail. I could end up on the side of the road. It was just getting deep. So I did get into the church. That was when I was really um, first embraced by the presence of Jesus and community. Jesus and community. I think I understood who Jesus was and God was, but for me, it's more about the community, being around people that were searching other things, not just all this partying and getting wasted and just escaping. These are people
mm.
more meaningful and had more better backgrounds in their life too, better morals and stuff. So
Did you grow up in the church?
yeah. So I did actually grow up in the church. I'm glad you asked that, but I was more of a casual churchgoer. I
Mm,
before I started really making decisions myself, my parents would just take us from denomination to denomination, just try different churches, and we were more of a we would go on Christmas, Easter. There was periods of consistency, but for whatever
mhm,
reason, we'd fall out. So, did grow up in the church, but it was really until I started seeking it myself that I really started to understand more about community and who God truly was. So, so during this period of my life, I did find some joy. I did end up getting saved, getting baptized. I think I was 16 at a church camp. But even after the baptism, it was it was all about the feeling. It was all about this feeling of happiness, feeling of kind of reacting to people like everyone else was doing it. I was like, oh,
mm,
they're finding joy in this. Let me do it. So I don't think I truly made the decision for myself. It was more being influenced. I was influenced by others. So because of that, I ended up graduating high school a couple years later, and then I pursued college, and before I knew it, I was back into my old ways. I was learning about new things. I pretty much look at it as my high school partying. We're able to reach only to a certain point because our age. College partying, we're able to progress it even more just based on what people were doing and you had more freedom in your life. I was no
Nice.
longer living under my parents' home. So I had freedom to, that freedom of choice, that freedom of choice to make whatever decision I wanted when I wanted. So that started being the driving force of my life, making my own decisions. I really started, I've always been a family guy, but I started to kind of separate myself from family because I just I didn't want anything to do with them. I wanted
Mm.
to, I was like searching for my own, just my own entity, I guess, my identity. So, so yeah, those relationships started to suffer, and I started getting into more companion relationships. This is when like 18, 19, I started pursuing those. Like, oh, this is where I can find true happiness and joy. And again, it only lasts. I'd get into these relationships. I'm talking, there was one relationship that lasted 4.5 years, another relationship that lasted about 2. So these are long relationships. But the
This is
beginning
in
of
high
them,
school?
yeah, yeah. So the first one was in high school to college. Well, into high school to college, and then the other one was kind of mid 20s. But I found in those relationships, it would they would be amazing for the first maybe few months, maybe up to 6 months. Amazing, just learning about someone else, finding, talking again about that loneliness. I was able to share my thoughts with another human being, of the other gender, and building that confidence with the other gender, and just being able to embrace each other. But it always had a timeline, or it always ended where in the relationship, those feelings would, again, the feelings, I was relying on the feelings, the other person was relying on the feelings,
Mm.
so nothing was sustained. So then I would fall back into traps of depression, anxiety, and start internalizing thoughts like, oh, why am I with this person? Is this truly the person for me? Is this, what am I doing? So I would have like a week of where things were good, maybe with the partner. And then the following week, I would be questioning, I'm like, why am I in this relationship? But the problem I had, I was unable to be assertive. I was unable to express this to the other person because I was scared. I was fearful how they were going to react. I was afraid I was going to hurt their feelings.
Mm.
So fortunately, in these relationships, there was a lot of hidden, or internalizing information or feelings from the other person. So they ended up in just disaster. Things got worse and worse. And so that was a lot of my 20s. A lot of my 20s was just trying to pursue these relationships and marriage, and everything. And I thought that's where I would find happiness. So now we're, kind of late 20s, and this is when I was just, I would say this was the toughest point in my life. I was thousands of miles away. This is about the time when we met, Troy. I was thousands of miles away from my family, who I was distancing myself from. I no longer had a companion relationship. At this time, I was very far from Christ. Like I remember I would see billboards of Jesus, and just like a verse, and I would just create so much anger, hatred. I was like those Christians, I would despise them and everything. So I had such a black heart, and everything. So my late 20s, I had to hit this point of just fully, um, just this dark pit, man, this valley. And I still remember the motions. Like I'm feeling the motions right now, just of, I'm like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I was praying. I was trying to pray a little bit, but I didn't know who I was praying to. Because I remember at this
Mm.
time too, I was meeting people that were involved in like Buddhism, self-realization fellowship, stuff like that. But I was just, I didn't know what to do. So eventually, like maybe a week later, going to church started filling my heart and everything. Like, man, I need to find a church. Need to find a church. And I think it was, you know, at this point, Troy, you and I had met, and then I had this other guy, Jeff, who was a patient of mine, and he came into our office looking. He was a new evaluation for physical therapy. And I'm like, hey Jeff, how you doing? My name's Chris Hucks. I'm a physical therapist. I'm gonna be taking care of you. And he was just a fired up guy. He was like, I'm Jeff, and he's like, this is the second best day of my life. Second best day of my life. And of course, him saying that, my response was, oh, what was the first best day? That he said, when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and personal Savior. And I'm like, oh
Wow.
man. I'm like, not one of these guys, not one of these guys. I'm like, oh man. So, I started building a relationship with him, and, just having that time. We had hour treatments. It started out, I'm like, man, I don't want to talk about this. I just want to treat this guy. I started listening, and then his story, again, we're talking about stories. His story started to resonate with mine. He got into meth. He got into drugs and alcohol. He's homeless. I remember him telling me the story of, he has a daughter, and he actually was not invited to his daughter's wedding because of where he was at in his life. He was, he was not reliable. He's not reliable. So he's pretty much not a father to her at that point in time. And I was just like, man, I do not want that. I do not want that, and everything. And,
So Jeff's an older guy.
yeah. He's probably around the same age as you, Troy. He was, yeah, I would say mid to maybe a little older, late 40s, maybe early
Hmm.
50s. So, yeah, and his fire was there, man. And similar to yours as well, man. We met on the tennis court, and you were able to address those really tough questions for me, and how you tied in gravity with Jesus Christ and the Word, and Christianity,
Hmm.
and the power of God. It was just really what I needed, because, again, going back where I was alone, I always wanted to ask questions in the church, but again, I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know if my questions would, just how people would react to them and everything. So I bottled up all this stuff. I wanted to know about the Bible. I wanted to know about Jesus. I wanted to know who I was worshiping. Why was I going to church every Sunday, singing this music, and connecting with these people? I understood the community aspect, but, well, why are we worshiping? Why are we surrendering to God and everything? So, yeah, so I started building relationships in San Diego, going to church, and everything, and it was a slow progression, man. Talking about depression, anxiety, very slow progression of finding my true um, purpose in God. Like, I was starting to take self out of the equation, and, as you know, when I started going to the church, self was 100%. So it slowly started to trickle, and then Jesus was down here at 0%. He started to he started 5%, 10%, as the self. So eventually it started going reverse and whatnot. So that's what I was truly learning how to do, but I still wasn't able to escape the depression, anxiety. That lasted for a while, and I think it has a lot to do with just being in such a deep pit for a long period, and the loneliness, not knowing how to express myself. So, yeah, man, I would say in the last, yeah, I can truly say, like, in the last year, I feel like I have been able to defeat it. And I think it's a combination of getting self out of the equation. So truly understanding what being selfless is, truly understand what agape love is, what God or Christ gives us every moment, every day of our life, that that unconditional love. So I've been able to learn that from studying the Word, having Marnell. So Marnell and I have gone through. Marnell is obviously but for everyone who doesn't know, Marnell and I, this is my fiance. We've been together for let's see, 2.5 years now. We're getting married in 2 months, but learning in a relationship how to give them agape love, not try to give them my own human self love.
Mm.
So it's been the practice, man, the practice over and over and over, and changing my habits, changing different things about my life. But the one thing that was lacking, I would say, is my work. My work was holding me back. I was allowing my work to influence my relationship with Marnell, relationship with God, family relationship, because I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't fulfilled in my work. I started questioning if I wanted to be a PT. I was like, oh man, what do I have a purpose in this? Maybe I want to be a pastor. Maybe I want to do this, that. I was thinking all these ideas. But man, as I've slowly gotten into more of the entrepreneur world, and I feel like I'm finally, even though I'm not making a lot of money right now, I'm making a lot less money than I was as a physical therapist. I'm finding fulfillment in each day, just serving people and progressing my business. And I'm understanding what looking at eternal is like, making decisions each day based on eternal reasons
Hmm.
versus short-term gratifications, where I was earlier just making these choices based on it giving me a sense of happiness for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. I'm making decisions based on the future, and my relationship with God, Marnell, my work. I'm just fostering these relationships, these people I'm marketing with. I'm just trying to give to them. When I contact them, I don't want anything from them. I don't. I'm going to explain to them who I am and why I'm contacting them. But truly, I just want to refer to them. I just want to give to them. So yeah, just learning those principles, man. And then money, dude. Like money had the control over me for so long in my life, and since I started tithing, I've been doing it consistently now for about a year. That has just opened up so many doors for me, in regards to
Mm.
giving and everything. So yeah, man, I can truly say, just in a better place in my life. And, I truly feel like I can now help people that are suffering from depression, anxiety, because I have escaped it. I've got myself right. And I'm no longer, when I'm talking, I'm listening to someone that's depression, anxious. I'm not taking on their feelings and bottling it up. And then maybe it pours over to my life. I'm able to connect with someone, listen, give good advice, but not actually take it on myself. So
Gotcha.
it's been a
I'd like
blessing,
to,
man.
that's awesome. So I'd like to come back to a couple of points you made earlier. And I think it's really important for everybody to understand because we really appreciate you sharing your story. And I wanted to come back to that billboard that you talked about it earlier and said that when you saw billboards, talking about Jesus, that you felt something inside. Can you share a little bit more about what was going on with that?
Oh man, yeah. So I would I would say, it, and it's really prevalent in the South. So this was in the South. I'll be traveling around Florida, Georgia, and stuff. When
Oh,
I'd see
Bible Belt.
yeah, exactly. The Bible Belt, Bible Belt was prevalent. I'd see these billboards, and this is when I made a decision in my life. Maybe around 1920, I was like, I don't want anything to do with Christ. I don't want anything to do with religion. I don't want to deal with those people. Like
What was that from? What's the thoughts that were entering your head?
I think because I think it was based on past experiences of different relationships I had with people, where I felt like they were trying to change me, or trying to really like pour this pour this practice on me, but not having any sense of who I was. Just
Did it feel
like,
like control?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're just trying to control my life, and they didn't get they again. I guess a lot of it is they didn't give me time to actually get to know me, and I'm just
Mm.
like, who's this person to say, um, choose this religion or follow Jesus, but all these other people are, um, just I look down on them, and everything. I still remember this experience in church. I think it was in middle school, early high school. Like they would take us through this. It was it's pretty much, heaven versus hell, good versus
Okay.
evil,
Yeah.
and it actually
Sure.
take us kids through like a creative, how to explain it, creative, what am I trying to say, like dictate, representation of, like walk us through, like say this like house, and we would go through what decision, based on these decisions you make in your life, you're gonna end up here in hell. And it was like this scary place, this room, very scary place, and there's fire and all this. This was a Baptist church. Not saying, pointing against Baptist, but they,
Sure.
and everything, but they dictate hell as such this bad place and everything. And there's heaven. So I was like, why is there hell? Why is there heaven? Again, I had all these questions. I guess no one could really, answer them for me. So I thought it was all made up, and, yeah, I just didn't understand it.
Mm, okay. So heaven and hell is much clearer for you today, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what would you say about those two things? What's clear about heaven and hell for you?
So what's clear is I was able to learn in these past few years what they actually represent, and how you get how you get there. I'll talk like learning in scripture in the Bible, actual verses of what heaven is, and then actual scriptures what hell is. So learning that hell isn't necessarily eternal fire, like you're not eternally roasting in this place, and everything. Learning more what it represents, and then heaven, how you actually get there, and, what happens after you die. So learning kind of that in between period of when you die, then between when you die, then go to heaven, and then what heaven actually represents. So, yeah,
Mm.
just learning the actual scripture and having something to back it up. I think that's the biggest thing. I was just
So the
listening to
facts,
Yeah, I was just
studying the
listening to
Bible.
people. Exactly, but there's no evidence. I was like, where's this coming from? Why? And it just felt like these people are basing what they were telling me based on what they've heard from another human.
Mm.
So actually going into the Bible, and, realizing the evidence of the Bible, and actually believing it from beginning to end, now I can be like, okay, now I get it.
Mm. Yeah, like when I shared with you when we first met, I said that the Bible is either 100% truth or 100% false. There's no in between. It is black and white like that. And just so the audience has a little bit better understanding of what I mean by gravity, is that gravity is one of those absolute things. And like God, you can't see it, you can't touch it, but it has a force directly on you every day,
Hmm.
right? It's inescapable. And so I love using the analogy of gravity in relation to who God is, because it's like those powerful things that are in our lives that are always around us and affecting us, but we can't see it, we can't touch it. And
Hmm.
so do you believe that gravity exists? Well, yeah, we do. As human beings, it acts on us every day, so we know it's there.
Hmm.
Does God act on us every day? Yeah, absolutely. And when we look out into this great wide world, and then into the universe, into space, we say, wow, and then you look at the microscopic level, the biological level. Excuse me. or the physical level, you know, like down into the atoms, you see this amazing, beautiful orchestra of
Mm,
life, and it didn't happen by chance, is my conclusion. And it's for everybody else to figure out, you know, for themselves. And the more we ask those big questions of how do we get here, why are we here, is then what leads us to maybe try to answer those questions the best we
mm,
can. And fortunately for us, we do have the internet and this amazing resource for information about knowing and then finding out what we also didn't know and knowing that too. But then there's this area of the don't know. And
mhm,
that's where we have a lot of opportunity to dig into the world of inquiry into that space. But it's something that's difficult to do by ourselves. And that's why I'm thankful that you have Marnell in your life, because it it helps to have other people in our lives who can see what we don't see.
mm,
And then oftentimes it doesn't come about like from some, you know, practitioner, because we're not trained in that. Even the practitioners are not trained perfectly in that. But what we find is that when we're triggered, then we go, oh, there's this area underneath the surface of the water. Because I often relate the area of don't know, or all the area of knowing, let's just say the areas of knowing something, the areas of don't know something, into the area of knowing. Okay.
mhm,
And then any of the areas of the don't know is in this giant iceberg underneath the surface of the water, which we know icebergs are gigantic under the surface of water. That's what sank the Titanic.
mhm.
And that is also what sinks us as human beings. And you had mentioned something during this sharing, which we really appreciate, about your life, and that there was a lot of periods of time where it seemed like you were with somebody. So when you were with somebody, you weren't feeling that sense of loneliness as much. Um, and you had a sense of purpose in that you were with somebody. When you're in school, you're in school. When you're out of school and working, you were working. So purpose is one of those other things that is very important to us as human beings. And and what I really identify with is how you transition, and you shared that in relating to how you started to give more as your relationship with God increased, which is very interesting because it has to do with how we learn to love. And
Mm,
there's the love of self and then the love of others. And as we learn to love others more, we also learn to love ourselves more, which is an interesting thing, not the opposite. Because a lot of people have this perception that like, well, I've been burned so many times because I love somebody else. No, they didn't properly love themselves first, so they allowed other people to burn them. That's how that looks.
mhm.
So when we learn to selflessly love on others, they're gonna, our human nature can't help but love the other person back. It's just one of those reciprocal things. But we always have this tendency to do as human beings, is like, well, I'm gonna give a little bit and then I expect a little bit back, and it doesn't work like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's an all in, all out thing. It is black and white again. And I find this to be very common amongst many different examples of life. Not that all are black and white. However, most things that I find in life are, you know, just like throwing a ball up into the air, you expect it to drop. It's black and white. It doesn't sit there in the middle of space and float there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, so like that analogy, you know, when it comes to serving others, the more that we find our purpose in loving and giving to others, and the smaller we become. But at the same time, the reverse of that is we're also learning to love ourselves more. And I think that's what you found for yourself
Mhm.
as you got deeper into your relationship with God, because you found out how much God loves you. And then you're like, wow, God loves me. I'm this, you know, this human being that did all these things in the past that I'm not proud of, that I feel shame over. And those are feelings again that dovetail into that sense of, well, you, when you were feeling lonely, did you wanted to separate yourself from other people, right?
Exactly.
um, and I bet that just like I felt in my relationships, whether it was when I was with family or I was in a relationship, that even when I was in those relationships, um, you still felt loneliness. Would that be
Ex-
true for you?
Yeah. I would even argue you. you feel more alone. If you're with the wrong person, you're gonna feel more alone versus if you're just by yourself.
Mm,
I would take it that far because you're you're relying on this other person, so you're almost becoming dependent on them. So then your sense of independent self is pretty much gone. So since you're not using the gifts God gave you, you literally are living for this other person. So if that person's not showing you love, not reciprocating love, then you're going to be just you'll have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to go since you're relying on
mm,
one other human being. So yeah, I would say that, man, you're the wrong person. You're going to end up being even more alone than just
mm.
not being with anyone. Hmm.
Yeah, I found that, at least for me, um, being able to eliminate loneliness from my life came down to the simple fact that I didn't love myself. And I
Mm,
mentioned that a couple times here. What I really, I don't know if you've seen this for yourself, but what I found is that when I'm able to look myself in the mirror, and for the longest time, majority of my life, I found out how much I really didn't, uh, love myself.
mm,
And 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 it was just anytime I looked at myself in the mirror. In fact, when I was most lonely and depressed, I couldn't look myself in the mirror,
mm,
and because I didn't like what I saw, I didn't like who I saw, and I find that when I started to shift that sense of knowing who God sees in me, and loving who God made me, is when I started to come out of that state of loneliness and depression.
mm,
And I find that anxiety is strongly tied to those feelings, loneliness and depression, anxiety, because anxiety is fear of the future, right?
mhm.
We're anxious about something, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That's what anxiousness is, isn't it? So I found that as I stopped worrying more about the future or the past, what things I couldn't deal with, but most of the time anxiety had to do with things about the future, what I was afraid of coming. That never, most of the time, never even happened. So the
Mm,
sooner I got on the same page as, that those things that I was thinking might happen never happened, then I started to realize, you know what? What's the point of being anxious about those things?
mm, mm.
Because at the end of the day, um, it's what I'm thinking about that then dictates how I feel. Would you
Yes.
say that's the same for you? And by the way,
Yeah.
the lighting on you is
Yeah.
you're
I was
really
gonna.
dark.
Here, let me do this. I think it's because of the glare or something.
Yeah, I think for the camera, it's
Here,
gotten a
here, let me
bit
try this.
dark.
Oh, there we go.
You look like one of those. There we go. Yeah, you look
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're one of those people that I was interviewing, and they were, you don't want to see their face because you're protecting their identity. What do they call those people? They're eyewitness.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man. So it was, yeah, based on, what was the question again? It was, you
that's
asked.
okay. No, it's just what we're talking about is simply, your own experience about um, what is it that you're feeling versus how you're thinking about something. And what I've learned from my studies is that, and it's straight out of the Bible actually, because God tells us to renew our mind daily. He doesn't tell us to renew our emotions or our heart daily. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, he tells us that our heart, whew, is deceptively wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And most people want to say, "Oh, it's from the heart." What do the movies teach us? Oh, it's from the heart. Because if you
Yes,
go from your
yes.
heart, then everything's going to work out great,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the things that as movies like to go, and our story and the way that we attach to things in movies is that it's like there's this high and then this low and then there's this high
Yes,
again,
yes.
right? The roller coaster effect. And
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that our emotions are driven directly from our thoughts. And I know that's hard and contrary to what a lot of people feel. Why, why do I say feel? Because that's exactly what it is. At the end of the day, it's what we feel. Sure, but what led to that? It's what we were thinking about.
Yes.
So God tells us directly in the Bible, renew your mind daily. It's our thoughts, which dictate our emotions. And our emotions is what drives what we say and what we actually do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we really think about that and allow ourselves to grasp what that concept looks like in our lives, is then we start to take control, if you will, over our thoughts. Why it's so important
Mm-hmm.
to take control of our thoughts, because our thoughts can lead us to how we feel. And I said this in our last conversation, in that if you were having a bad day and I said smile, right? Just try it on, smile. Did it change how you felt? Absolutely, because you
Yeah.
actually thought the word smile. You had to tell yourself to smile, and
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you did that, the emotions and the feelings that you had dissipated,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Contracted those facial muscles to actually smile. Yeah.
That's right. Because you have to
Mm-hmm.
force yourself to smile. And when as soon as you smiled, then you start giggling or laughing, because it's just in our nature to like let go, because it takes a lot more energy to actually be negative,
Mm.
right? It takes a
That that
lot of energy.
that is a good point. That is a good
Think
point.
about what people dealt with. I mean, I dealt with, whenever I was depressed, I was tired a lot. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy, I'm energized.
Yeah.
But it's a choice.
Yeah, man. What I would do a lot when I was dealing with some depression, man, I'd go right to bed. I didn't want any stimulation around me, so I felt like just laying down again, trying to escape those problems. Just lay down, try to sleep, and not deal with anything, not deal with the world, not deal with your thoughts, your emotions, any of that stuff. Um, yeah, you're so right about that. And one thing I wanted to add, because you hit so many good points, was so when I was having that transition period in my life of Jeff coming to my life, witnessing you coming to my life, witnessing you both of you guys, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to make that leap. You didn't have to invest this time into this other human being. Especially for you, Troy, like, we were, just learning about each other in tennis, on the tennis court and everything. And
We're
you were,
competitors.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was, yeah, there you go. But you were pretty much, I saw, like, when we met, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good guy, possibly we'll be friends. But you're literally willing to put our friendship on the line to answer these deep questions for me, to and at that time, I know you remember, like, I would cancel on you. We'd have a meeting, I would escape, I would be like, oh, I don't want to go into that uncomfortable position, I don't want to address that. And that's another way I've been able to just to escape depression, anxiety, like you guys getting to this point where it's almost like an analogy. Your cup is full, so then you're able to, then it starts to overflow, and when it starts to overflow, or it can only overflow when it's full, and that
Mm,
overflowing is you pouring into my life, um,
awesome.
myself pouring over to someone else's life. But it's God. God teaches us that faith, like you were talking about, to take that chance, that leap, to ask someone, "Oh, do you know Jesus?" Or "Jesus loves you." Or, I asked my brother a couple weeks ago, "Let's do a Bible study." That's something I would never, I might have thought of, but I wouldn't actually put the action in. So truly, to escape depression, anxiety, you just start putting action in. You start getting uncomfortable. You don't settle on anything. We just, as men, we want to just keep pursuing adventure and the unknown. I think that's what really fills us up and makes us feel alive. So just
Mm,
wanted to add those points. You really made some good points there and everything.
thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as what is the indicator for you that you've been able to defeat it? Because that was the word you used, defeated
Hmm.
depression.
So what was the indicator?
How did you
So
know?
so I knew based on, first, like, how I feel, or not how I feel, but based on what was going through my mind when I was waking up, like actually feeling joy or excitement when I woke up, versus not wanting to get up, like, oh, I just want to snooze, I want to sleep a little longer, I don't want to have to deal with talking with people or anything. So once I started
Mm.
started getting that mentality on a regular basis, and I'm back to doing things I love, like working out and just looking forward to talking to you. Looking forward to getting on this talk and just sharing life together, and just yeah, just not. I think the biggest indicator was getting out of my own head. Obviously, thoughts are always going to come into our head. We're human beings, and
Hmm.
we're always going to fall short the glory of God. But the the frequency is almost not even there. And like you said, I'm able to take control of those thoughts. Like if something negative comes in my head, I've gone through this practice of actually like writing it down, and then I pray on it, and I write like, what's the consequences of this? So actually, not just trying to skip over them. Does that make sense? Like actually really trying to
Sure.
understand what they are, where they're coming from, and
Ah,
so
so you're
yeah,
looking into the iceberg, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
You start to think more about it as opposed to just gloss it over and move on with your day.
Yes, yes.
I think
Getting in
that
depth.
that's what taking your thoughts captive looks like
Yes.
in practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we start to analyze, what was I thinking about? What's causing me to feel this? So if we work in reverse, we from the feeling we're having into how we're thinking about something, that's where you have the real possibility of making that change for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yep. And
Absolutely.
the last time that I was sharing the difference between change versus transformation, um, the one of the words that caught my ear that you used was escaping depression. And escape would also kind of like if you're escaping somebody who's chasing you, right? So if you would think of the analogy of like being chased by somebody or something, that would be kind of in the world of change, kind of. And the reason why I'm saying it that way is because um, there's something that's still pulling you back,
Yeah.
pulling you in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the the best way that I found to determine that I have literally eliminated something, as in it doesn't exist anymore for me, is, well, life happens. So I shared how I lost my pup, my amazing dog
Little
and
biscuit.
companion for 13 years. Yeah,
Mm.
Biscuit. Is that well, I mean, I didn't predict that, didn't want it, heck no, but it happened, and I lost her. And right in front of me, unexpectedly by a coyote. Um, it was just horrible. But one of the things that was another indicator in my life that I had literally eliminated depression is that in a matter of a few days, I was able to transform the experience of sadness, which is the human and natural thing for me to feel. But I never became depressed. Um, what I was sad, sad over the loss, sad over the fact that she wasn't with me in my bed anymore and snuggled up against my head like she would be. Um, However, it didn't take away from my daily activities.
Mm.
I wasn't staying in bed. I wasn't separating myself from other people. Right? These are the things that lead to loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
leads to depression. Right? That separation. And I chose to still serve people, talk to people. In fact, I really jumped into more people's lives during that time, and they jumped into mine because as I
Mm-hmm.
shared what happened in my life, and I'm thankful for that too, for things like Facebook, where I shared this story, and I don't share it too often on Facebook, but I did on this one, and so many people poured into my life in terms of how they loved on me,
Mm.
and they really showed me how amazing I was as a puppy dad to her. Because oftentimes, we start to think, oh, I didn't do enough, or I wasn't a good enough person to this other person or other being,
Mm.
like Biscuit. And I was concerned like she didn't have a good enough life. And they all reminded me of how amazing of a life she had because of me in her life. And that was huge.
Mm.
So what I found is that I never went into that depression, and I chose to celebrate the life that I got to live with her. What a privilege, right?
Mm.
When I focus on the privilege of who Biscuit was in my life is then when I started to transform the experience of what was a change in my life, in other words, I didn't have in my life, into um, into a celebration of the life that I got to have with Biscuit.
Mm.
And I share this in, for the purpose of helping people to understand that there is that distinction of change versus transformation. And this is what it really can look like when the rubber meets the road, right? When you actually encounter a really difficult circumstance in life, and we say, "Oh yeah, I'm done with alcohol. I'm done with drugs." Okay. Obviously, I'd never prescribe this particular test, but for somebody who has dealt with alcohol, if you've dealt with it properly. In other words, you've transformed the experience, but you would never go back to being drunk ever again.
Mm.
That's a choice that you make. And what that looks like when the rubber meets the road is you could actually have a beer or a glass of wine, right? Or a
Mhm.
shot.
Mhm.
And you wouldn't want a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth to get drunk again. Why? Because what led us to those actions, those activities was oftentimes what we're trying to do is separate our thoughts from the feelings that we were having from our past.
That's true. That is true.
So transformation is that that ultimate distinction where when we've gone through, we say that change happens and all of a sudden it's there's no more need for change because now from this point forward, transformation looks like I'm doing every activity that leads towards the goal I have in mind, what
Mm.
I want in my life. So when I think about your example of waking up and you're feeling joy and happiness in your life, what I really wanted to ask you is what sort of thoughts were you having? Because I would imagine that it had a lot to do with gratitude. You were feeling gratitude about your life as opposed to sorrow, which was prevalent before in your thoughts, right? And that would have made a massive difference between if you're going to feel joy or sorrow. So I think about those things. And by the way, I actually have, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a guy blowing in my backyard right now. The landscapers have been here for about half an hour. They're doing my neighbors and they're doing my backyard now. And the microphone on my headset is just pretty amazing. Probably can't even hear it or barely.
Barely. It is pretty amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that that you're probably thinking a lot about that. But I'd like to hear your thoughts. What was it? What was going through your mind when you were finding for yourself that freedom,
Yeah, yeah. So,
that joy?
so yeah, I like that you brought up that example because the things I was finding in my life were like you kind of hit the. I would choose a state of gratitude over a state of anxiety, worrying over like, depression, different things. So what I started to practice was every morning when I wake up, besides doing your normal business, I would go to the mirror. And also, I love that you brought up you had a difficult time almost looking at yourself in the mirror. So I would, I had the same difficulty actually, but I would literally force myself right in the morning to look in the mirror and say three things I was grateful for every morning. And I always tried the practice of not saying the same thing over and over and not being grateful for my family like every time because then it just becomes routine. So always trying to put my mind in a state of gratitude, and I was putting my mind in a state of kind of waking up the mind, waking up the machine, because I had to actually it's hard, it's difficult when you're not used to being grateful for things. You take things for granted.
Mm,
It's difficult to think about these things to actually, and not one not only think about them but actually believe it, like actually be grateful for it. It's like if I was having this conversation with you and I was just saying words but I wasn't saying words with love or words with gratitude. It wouldn't really mean anything. And we probably wouldn't be, this interview would have ended a lot, a lot earlier, but actually like, so make it a point, like being in the mirror, in front of the mirror, looking at yourself, like you said, and just saying three things I'm grateful for every morning. And then actually laughing. Like sometimes I would just start, just start laughing at myself, looking at myself and smiling, and then just embracing who I was. I'm like, I'm Christopher Hawks. I'm a child of God. He made me for a specific purpose, and just really, really embracing that moment, because I thought of something too when you're talking about that, how you had a difficult time looking at yourself. So I remember throughout my like 20s, when I started really getting into partying and whatnot, I tried to become a whole different person. Like I always say this, like I was living an out of body experience.
Hmm.
So in other words, I wasn't grateful. I wasn't happy with who I was, who God made me to be. I was shy, I was awkward, I was my dad would always try to put me in situations to make me talk to this, take me to his office and talk to fellow employees, and just didn't have anything to say, and just didn't want anything to do with anyone. I'm like, man, why am I so? And then I would always compare myself. I'd compare myself to people, maybe peers that were smarter, um, that were better in sports, just all these different things. So just was never happy with who I was. So yeah, it was until these like past few years when I started embracing who I was again, being grateful for the little things.
Hmm.
Like you said, like and just embracing what people would say about me, giving me like positive affirmations. And not pushing aside, oh, what are you talking about? I don't have
Hmm.
that trait or whatever. But yeah, just being grateful for everything has been a major indicator, like you said, in my life, that just in a better place, and I'm
Hmm.
actually who I am. Who God
Awesome. So playing
intended.
the
Yeah,
gratitude
yeah,
game.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I've been sharing that with a lot of different people because I found that just that one thing it's a game changer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. And it can lead to transformation in
Yes, it can.
people's lives. Um, but, sometimes when we talk about escape, that use the word escape from something, it's still in that world of change. So my goal for anybody who I'm in contact with is ultimately transformation, so that it's literally it doesn't exist anymore,
Mm,
right? And the only way to
absolutely.
know that it exists is then life happens. We'll just call it that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we'll know for sure when the things that used to take us out in life, um, you know, doesn't do that anymore,
Absolutely. Well
right?
said, Troy. Well said.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you'd love to share with us today about your disappearing or eliminating? I use the word disappearing. You have defeated.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Defeat and depression. I like that. Um, yeah, I just want to end on, you know, thanks for taking the time of, just talking about my story, and I just hope this is a blessing to you all. I hope you all that are dealing with this depression, anxiety, no matter what level it is, that you will just, you know, look at the big picture, and just look at um, just I would say biggest thing, just take baby steps. Just take baby steps. Don't put shame on yourself. 'Cause it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes these habits over and over again. So don't put more shame or more guilt that you already have, and just remember it's a process. And yeah, say that.
Great. Yeah. So I think from what I've heard you say, it's going to be focusing on your thoughts
Hmm.
and then being able to reflect on the feelings that you have back onto your thoughts.
Yes.
You've applied gratitude in your life, that it's also been a big piece. You've also increased your relationship with who God is in your life and had a transformation in your life, and you dedicated your life to Jesus. Because I think when you were a kid, you hadn't really had that transformation. You were more or less going religiously to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll create a quick distinction around that for people who might not know it. But for a lot of people, what I'd say religion is, or religiousness is humans attempt to get to God. In other words, to be good. And we know that we're not really capable of being good. We can be good at doing things or good at times, but not all the time.
Mm.
God doesn't call us to be good all the time. In fact, he knows we're not going to be because of sin in our lives. So that's actually a big relief, not the opposite, where a lot of people run around with guilt and shame. Like you had said,
Mm.
Chris, it's really important to recognize that we got to give ourselves grace, because that's who Jesus is, right? He is love, and he gave us grace. God gives us grace and that forgiveness.
Mm.
And I think it's really important that we learn to forgive ourselves first before we can never try to forgive others.
Yes.
We got to be able to forgive ourselves. And when we forgive ourselves, then shame is eliminated from our lives, because we
Absolutely.
now know that we fall under grace, that unmerited favor. And religiousness is our attempt to get to God, whereas faith is actually God knocking on our heart's door, and he's saying, hey, open your heart's door to me, receive me into your life as your savior, because I died on the cross for your sins.
Mm. Amen.
Right. And it's super important to understand that distinction, because a lot of people think of going to church as religiousness, and it can be, absolutely, right? Just like you did when you're going into church as a kid, that was religious because you had no real purpose for being there, because you were kind of like had to be there since your parents were in control of your life at that time. And so much of life looks like that, whether we're going to a job where we feel like we have to go, when we fail to realize that it's a privilege that we have a job,
Mm-hmm.
that we have an opportunity to have purpose, even if it's cleaning toilets or it's changing bedpans. I'm using the the gross things, but on the other hand, you could be a surgeon, you could be a software programmer, you could be a caretaker.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. The point is that that's not necessarily our purpose in life. Our purpose in life is to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
Our purpose in life is to serve God. and and that's what I believe to be a truth, an immutable truth of our creation on this planet, was that God created us to love him and to love others and to love ourselves, right? All
Mm-hmm.
equally important.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you, Chris, for sharing what you've shared, and it's really important that people understand how important it is to focus on what we're thinking about. And it's very difficult sometimes because we are inundated with a lot of negative thoughts
Yeah.
and a lot of negative experiences, because right now we're in a at this particular point in history, it's unprecedented in that the entire globe is on hold because of this potential pandemic, which is all speaking about anxiety. I mean, that's what all the news is about when it comes to talking about COVID-19, is the possibility of world spread of this virus that could lead to death, could lead to death. But what we found statistically now, that it's been around since January, is that your chance of dying from it is at tops 5%. I mean, that's significant, and I wouldn't want anybody to die from it. However, that's not that impactful.
Yeah.
We really think about that. And when we really look at the global numbers, it's just over 2 million people now after 4 months. Oh my gosh, that's really nothing compared to nearly 8 billion people, or whatever number we want to use.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in the billions of people, and that's really not that many affected.
Yeah.
So confirmed cases.
I agree.
So I really think that it's about, like, there's this I don't know what the future holds as far as why the governments around the world have chosen to do this. It looks benevolent, but I think unfortunately there's some other things that might be in play that have led to why we're in this position. But ultimately, what I'd love for people to get out of this time is is that it's an opportunity that we've all had to really reflect upon ourselves and the people we get to have in our lives and the things that we get to choose for ourselves. And most importantly, slow down,
Yep.
because, socially speaking, the globe has been speeding along faster and faster. We liken it from the 90-minute workout to, a 30-minute workout to a hit workout,
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
7-minute workout, high intensity training. And people are like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And we don't have time for a lot of things. But the reality is that we do. It's just that we weren't making time for those things. And so I look at this as a wonderful opportunity that we've had with COVID, that it's caused the entire globe of people to recognize, hopefully, what is important and what's not.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Looking forward to our next conversation. But until then, yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Sounds good, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I look forward to it too.
Awesome.
Take care, man.
All right. You too.